Thank you. I'll start off with something that I forgot to do a slide of, so I'll get that out of the way straight away. And that's to give thanks to our funders, which was the Society of Antiquaries of Scotland and SSE Renewables Wind Farm. Thanks also to Southampton University, who provided the divers with a couple of inflatable boats and some other equipment, and to Aberdeen University for advice and support throughout the project and for storage of our samples before we can get any analysis done of them. Throughout this talk I'll be saying we about what happened on the project. That can encompass not just myself and the immediate team, but probably about 50 different volunteers who were involved at various stages. So, do you remember lockdown? It seems a long time ago, but that's when this project started. When Boris first allowed 5 of us to meet up outside. So 5 members of NOSAS met in my back garden to chat about a Zoom talk we'd heard from Michael Strategas about Crannogs. And we thought there was much scope to find out more. This one's Loch, by the way, and like most island Crannogs, it looks like a pile of rocks. Maybe a bit of grass and trees, but mainly rocks. And it's all this guy's fault. A monk from Fort Augustus Abbey, he seemed to spend most of his time stravagging about the countryside looking for Crannogs. And he's single-handedly responsible for recording most of the ones that we know about today. He can't have had much time for monkeying. But what if he missed some? Recent work by others in the Northern and Western Isles, Cape Ness and North Sutherland, had revealed a few new ones. So we thought we'd have a look at the rest of the islands. But how? Where to start? As you probably know, the OS labels each 100 kilometres square in the UK with a 2-letter prefix. So we decided to start with the square label NH. So we recruited volunteers from within NOSAS and allocated groups of 10 kilometre squares to individuals to study satellite images to look for any little island that might just be a Crannog. After completing NH, we added parts of adjacent squares, which are shaded green on the map. We recruited more volunteers because we'd worn some of them out already, and eventually we gave up when we covered about 18,600 square kilometres. So what did we find? 26 volunteers identified about 350 small islands which might be unrecorded Crannogs. It was beyond our resources to go and look at all of them, so the steering group, that's those 5 who first met in my garden, met again and checked out all the satellite images and came up with a target list of 40 to visit on site. Now let's have a look at some of these targets. They were all plotted on a web map, thanks to Bob Jones and sterling work on that. I'm afraid the green ones don't show up too well, but you can find this on the NOSAS website if you want to have a look for yourself. And you can click on any of the coloured dots and it opens up a record sheet showing what you found. And I want to show you the one up at the top there with a red box around it. This is Loch, and it's on high ground south of Strathoitel. And you can see on the satellite image a very regular round island. And if we zoom right in, absolute corker. Looks like some sort of a circular structure on the island, just the right size for a Crannog, so we just had to go and have a look. There's got to be something there, right? Well, there's a peat bank in the swamp. Here it is a bit closer, and we learned quite a lot about this, about not just seeing what you hope to see, but having a good look at all the evidence. What we seem to have here is some sort of a, and to be fair, you could spot it on the satellite image if you weren't so fixated on that enticing round thing. And we should have checked old maps. That's the first edition OS on the left, small loch, no island, and on the right, later edition, larger loch with island. Anyway, we completed a record sheet, and you can find a sheet like this for all the ones we visited on our website in the Crannog report. Loch na Fiúlach, Loch of the Gulls, Another likely looking one just to the west of the Kirk Road, and it's a small island close to shore with the possibility of a causeway linking it to the shore. And causeways are a quite common feature on Crannogs, but by no means universal. So I went to look at this one, and it's just a look at the bedrock. Loch was another great hope, just the right size and shape, in a loch which has one recorded Crannog, and finding more than one in the same loch's not unknown. We couldn't tell from shore, so it needed to be dived. Now don't be deceived by the blue sky and sunshine. It was bitterly cold and there was ice on the water. It remains the one and only time I've ever dived under ice or used a canoe as an icebreaker. Underwater, the loch bed was mainly sheets of bedrock which simply sloped up to form an island and no evidence of human intervention. Loch Scarven, the lungs loch, probably from a legend about water horses, which would eat you all up except the lungs, which would be left floating on the surface. I didn't tell my buddy who was diving with me that day about this legend until afterwards. Many of you will have driven past this one. It's between Achilty and Loch Carron, and it was another chilly day. You see the snow in the background. So one of our party magnanimously decided he should stay in the car and provide safety cover while the rest of us came down to the sleep shower. The larger of the two islands there, we quickly discounted its huge boulders and outcropping bedrock, but the smaller one still looked promising, so we snorkeled around it. Alas, it also proved to be natural, with no change in slope to indicate an artificial mound. Now this is an interesting one. Loch Achilty. I'd like to show you this one between Plockton and Kyle of Loch Alsh, just to show how tricky it is to identify a Crannog from satellite images. So here's the loch, nothing very obvious there. But if you look at the white circle, there is a tiny dot. And if you zoom right in, this is what you get. Would you think that's a Crannog? Well, I'm not convinced, but shock and awe, not only is it recorded, it's even scheduled. And it was dived by Martin Wild-Goose and Stephen Birch, who probably many in the audience will know. So if they say it's a Crannog, that's good enough for me. Time to admit now that we didn't actually find any unrecorded Crannogs. But that isn't to say there aren't any. Because if they look like this, we might just not have spotted them. I would draw your attention, I don't know if you can read it from there, but the highlighted yellow part there, it says there are two Crannogs, but only one's visible, and there are loose timbers scattered around in some numbers. So just hold those thoughts. We now turned our attention to recorded Crannogs about which very little was known. No excavation, no scientific data, no anything really. There's anecdotal evidence that this one in Loch Glass might be early modern period, built by a laird as a summer house. Even has a name, Eileen na Fulig, Loch of the Gull. Only one gull this time, apparently. Underwater, this one's clearly man-made. It's a steep stone revetment sitting on a virtually stone-free loch bed. And we found a couple of pieces of jointed timber, which you can see on the left, and surprisingly some dressed masonry. But without sampling the timber, there was nothing to suggest a date, and the timber might not have been contemporary with the construction, because it is just lying there on the bed of the loch. But we took measurements and we were able to draw a plan and cross sections, and that gives you an idea of the bulk of the structure, which isn't evident from the very little that's visible above the surface. In the very next glen to Loch Glass is Loch Moray. That's Loch Glass in the left-hand frame and Loch Moray on the right. Each has a recorded Crannog very close to the outlet. Loch Moray, I think, is probably Mary's Loch. The Loch Moray Crannog looks very different. Different satellite images show the loch level fluctuates, and sometimes it's barely visible. Sometimes it appears as a perfect circle. It's characterised by a series of huge boulders, which with imagination you might think have been deliberately placed. There's a mixture of stone sizes from gravel right up to boulders, and the divers found the loch bed to be exactly the same, a mixture of stone sizes and no change in slope to indicate an artificial mound. There are also similar big boulders around the edge of the loch. So, not content with failing to find new Crannogs to add to the record, we must respectfully suggest that this one should be taken off. Loch and Achilty, this one's a real expedition. It's about as remote as you can get. First you have to drive all the way up the private road at Strathfarrett and Mona Lodge. Blundell recorded 2 Crannogs in Loch, which is actually the next loch to the northeast. But we understand this name was originally applied to the whole series of lochs in the glen. There is an island in Loch, but it doesn't look anything like a Crannog. That name means either the Pike Loch or possibly a small arable plot. So, courtesy of Pat Estate, we travelled by landing craft up Loch Mona to Pat Lodge, where we took to Argo cats to take us up to the loch, where a little red boat with an outboard awaited us. The lower picture shows the first island, which is linked to the shore by 2 causeways, and these certainly look man-made. The island itself, less so. The east side might have been enhanced, but the north and west look more natural, and the thick vegetation makes it impossible to see if the top is natural or not. We took the boat over to the second island, which looked very promising from a distance, but on reaching it, the bedrock and boulders had a very natural look about them. So, having carried the dive gear so far, we were determined to have a dive, but it only confirmed that this is a natural island. And going back to Blundell's original record, it appears he never actually went there himself. He was relying on a statement from the local, so we can't say that he made a mistake. Now, Lochs Achilty and Kinellen. Here we have 2 Crannogs very close together, but very different in appearance. Achilty, which is a Pictish name, High Bank I think it might mean, that's only 17 metres across, and it's your typical pile of stones. Kinellen, on the other hand, is entirely vegetated, with only a little snow visible around the edge, and it's huge in Crannog terms, 80 metres by 45. It was Kinellen that first piqued our interest, as it had been excavated in 1914, and there's a very comprehensive report in the proceedings of the Society of Antiquaries Scotland. This is the plan from the antiquarian report, showing the pit positions, and they dug something, I think it was 22 pits. And when we visited the island, we were actually able to locate several of the pits, so we can't have made too great a job of the backfill. But that's one of the pits in the left-hand photograph. And that's a section of one of the pits. It shows a very well stratified deposit, multiple occupation layers, brushwood, timber, charcoal, and we thought this would give us a superb opportunity to obtain radiocarbon dates from secure contacts to give a complete chronology of its construction and use. The only dating from 1914 was 3 shards of pottery out of several hundred recovered. And they were judged to be medieval by a contemporary expert. There were lots of other finds from it, even a logboat dug out of there. Unfortunately, where all that assemblage has gone, we don't know. And one of our volunteers spent an awful lot of time trying to track it down, contacting museums, trying to contact the descendants of the people who've been originally involved, but unfortunately came up with nothing. So, scheduled monument, had to get scheduled monument consent, had a meeting with Historic Environment Scotland, a second meeting. Unfortunately, they didn't bite at all, and so their response could be summed up in 2 words, the second of which was off. Lastly, we come to Loch Achilty, which has been subject to an excavation which only finished yesterday. We'd hoped to do a compare and contrast exercise with Kinellen, but we had to do Achilty alone. It was mentioned in the New Statistical Account of 1845, inspected by Blundell in 1913, visited by the OS in 1970, but there's been no modern examination until now. I first snorkeled around it, and it was pretty obviously an artificial mound, and I could see lots of timbers, but they were too deep to get a good look. So with the help of a diver from the Nautical Archaeological Society, we got a better look, and two of the timbers were of particular interest. You see in the right-hand slide there, that's the base of the stone mound where it meets the Loch bed, which runs off to the right, relatively level. So these are the two timbers, left-hand one, not just lying on the Loch bed, but partially buried in the stone mound, which makes it much more likely that it's part of the construction. So timber one on the left is concave. It's a sort of hollowed out log, about 1.8 metres of it's exposed, about 800 millimetres wide. And timber two on the right is right at the bottom, extending under the stone mound and almost completely buried in silt. So we were able to get samples of these two, which we had carbon dated. Number one is 14th century and number two is 11th century. So that's around the time of Macbeth. Interesting times. So it appears to be a medieval crannog, which is quite rare. And remember, the only date from Kinellan, just a few miles away, is also medieval. From the measurements we took on those initial dives, we were able to produce this plan. And this is what we found on the Loch bed. If you remember, look at Achilty, wild goose and birch, lots of timbers lying around on the Loch bed, and that's exactly what we have here. Over several dives we've managed to record 17 timbers and sample 12 of them, 9 are oak and 3 birch. More recently we've been able to get drone photos, and that's allowed an orthographic view and an update of the plan, combining our survey measurements with the orthographic image, results in this plan, and you can see on there our proposed trench positions, trench 1 there, and trench 2 in there. And thanks to NOSAS member David Newman for producing this plan. Another thing we were able to do with the help of Michael Shatigas and one of his colleagues was a site scan sonar survey. So that's Michael in the picture, and the little remote control vessel is a bodyboard with a sonar device mounted underneath. And it found this pile of stones, which looks remarkably like another crannog, which doesn't quite break surface. It also found a third one as well. So, remember again, Loch Achilty, that's what they found there. We put divers down on both of these potential targets, and I think I'm confident in saying that we have now discovered 2 unrecorded crannogs in Loch Achilty. The divers, the one who found the third target, he swam along the loch bed, came to this big mound, swam up the slope, and he was able to stand on the top of it, and he was only in waist deep water. Unfortunately, nobody on the boat had a camera, so we didn't get a picture of that. But yeah, they're very similar to the known crannog. They are mounds of similar sized stones. Let's move on quickly. NOSAS trench on top of the crannog, euphemistically termed the terrestrial trench. Limiting factor was how far we could reach underwater. So here's Cathy passing out a stone. But it wasn't just stones, we very soon came on timbers, 3 in all. Lowest one, well over 600 mil wide, 280 deep. But we couldn't see it, we could only feel it, because the silt in the water left 0 visibility. But it was smooth and level on the top, rather like a floor. Either side of the timber was soft black silt, so we took bulk samples by simply scooping handfuls out into a bucket. James at the back shows how deep we got. He is actually kneeling down there. So there's a bucket of silt, which we wet sieved, and we found a coin. 2014 euro 1 cent. But that was at the very top, so we're hoping for better things from lower down. The divers arrived, set up at Achilty holiday cottages, and you see all the dive cylinders laid out there by the wall, and a gazebo covering the compressor. Maybe they were expecting bad weather. And they also brought these inflatable boats courtesy of Southampton, whereas NOSAS travelled in more traditional craft. Back to the silt, and we were able to get a core sample. The core managed to cut through that whitish layer you can see near the bottom, and that's timber, it's wood, very, very decayed, but that was immediately below the big oak floor timber, so appeared to be possibly supporting it. The photo on the right is an artefact divers found, initially thought to be a paddle, but it's not. It's birch wood, and it's a half round, but you've still got the bark on the outside edge. So we don't know what it is. Ideas on postcard. This gives you an idea of how massive the timbers are. There are several this size. The diver is actually putting a label around one of them. On the left, you're looking down onto the top of the first underwater trench, which starts right hard up against the island and goes some 3 metres deep. And we reckon they lifted about 16 tonnes of rock out of there, and of course had to put it all back. On the right is a second underwater trench, in which there was this big timber, which is probably at about 45 degrees roughly. It comes almost to the surface, followed it down, probably about 4 metres. We never got to the bottom of it, but we did saw the top off for a dendrochronology sample. It took 2 hours to saw. And we lifted another artefact from underneath it. There was a strange piece of timber under the bottom. I have no idea what it is, but it was definitely worked. So we're fortunate to get some super drone photos. Here you can see the black hole in the centre, which was the NOSAS trench. Zooming in a bit, you can see 4 bags in the water, which is what we put the stones in, 2 white spots, which are markers for photogrammetry. Zoom further in, we think we might have found true purpose of Crannogs. As you get deeper, you realise that Crannog was built to cover a wormhole into another dimension.